morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all, wherever you are. I'm sure there are people from many different time zones with us today, and it's a pleasure to be able to spend a little bit of time speaking to you about spiritual healing. Just before we start, I'll give you a very brief look into my background and how I got involved in spiritual healing. I promise not to spend too much time going through what's happened in the past. But essentially, I was born into a family of healers. My father was a trance healer, and my mother was a Reiki healer. So Reiki was kind of in the family for most of my childhood. I began healing myself when I was 15 years old, and I've been healing ever since. So that's a little bit of insight as to my experience over the years. It's been quite extensive. I've worked with many different groups over many different parts of the UK, and also in different parts of the world as well. So we're going to start. We're going to have a look at spiritual healing. Now, here in the UK, spiritual healing has pretty much been renamed to just healing. Lots of people shy away when they hear spiritual or anything to do with spiritual aspects. It kind of frightens people away for some reason. So it's better known now as just healing. The famous healing organization over here, the National Federation of Spiritual Healers, has actually renamed itself to the Healing Trust. So healing, spiritual healing is now better known as just healing. And I want to start with focusing on the light. Many people refer to the healing light. And I just wanted to start off with going into that in a little more detail and explaining why it should be that people refer to healing as the healing light. And that's predominantly because when people in the spirit world see the physical form, they see the light within us. They see that spirit form, which is a light vibration and is located very close to the heart chakra. So if you're fortunate enough to be gifted with clairvoyance, you may actually see that on some people. But that's the life force within everybody, and it emanates from around the heart chakra area. And that's why people quite often refer to the healing light. We channel energy and we support that light in the physical form. Now, just to have a brief look at the history of spiritual healing, I want to go back through the decades and just highlight a few points as we've progressed through the years. Now, the word healing itself comes from the Anglo-Saxon word healen, meaning to make whole, and that refers to the body and spirit elements of the human body to be healed. We've always had the power to heal ourselves. It's instinctive. If you injure yourself, what's the very first thing you do? You take your hand and you cover the area that's in pain, or you place your hand in whichever part of your body is suffering. And that's a natural reaction. You're responding to that innate healing ability that's within each and every one of us. And if you go back in time, into ancient times, there was no distinction between the body, the mind, and the spirit. The energy force that was the force that permeated that trinity. Science and health professionals over more recent years have separated that, and they now focus on the physical body as opposed to the other energy bodies. And only when the energy bodies are in harmony with each other will the physical body come back into balance and operate the way it was meant to do. And as we go through this course, and in fact a little further in this in my talk this morning, I'm going to show you images of the energy field and how it's affected. So the science and the health professionals have separated mind, body, spirit, and they focus only on the physical. And in more recent times, I'm not sure about in the US, but certainly here in the UK, healing only became legal again in 1951, which isn't too far. It isn't too many years ago. Prior to that, it was illegal, and we had the Witchcraft Acts and the all sorts of other government acts that closed down any form of healing. And because of that, there was much ignorance around healing, and people tend to forget that healing is actually our birthright. Healthcare and medicine have progressed without any spiritual elements for many, many years. And I think over more recent years, people have become a little less satisfied with what the healthcare system has to offer, and they've been looking for alternatives. And we need to remember that everybody has the ability to heal. Healing is a form of mediumship. And if you look at mediumship, you have the clairvoyance, clairsentience. They are a heightened state of awareness. And down the other end of the spectrum, where you have trance, you also have spiritual healing. So it's more of a passive energy, but it is nonetheless a form of mediumship. And fortunately for the healers of today, it's no longer seen as a last resort. People embrace healing pretty much from the instant they begin to feel ill. And it's far more acceptable these days than perhaps it's ever been in the past. To the point now where certainly here in the UK, it's accepted in the hospitals, it's accepted by the medical authorities. All you need to do is to prove that you've been appropriately trained, and you can work in the hospitals, or you can have people referred to you from your doctor. And that's really been just through the past, probably about the past 10 years. Now, prior to healing becoming mainstream, it was practiced in many different areas throughout time, going back as far as 300 BC, when Greece was heavily influenced by the cult of Asclepius. Asclepius was the Greek god of healing, and healing ran side by side with modern day medicines. Asclepius, as I said, was the Greek god of medicine and healing. He was the son of Apollo and Coronis. His mother was killed for being unfaithful to Apollo, and he was rescued from his mother's womb while she lay on the funeral pyre. And this is how he received his name, Asclepius, which means to cut open. Apollo then carried the baby to Centaur Chiron, who raised Asclepius and instructed him in the art of medicine. Centaur Chiron was half man, half horse. He was intelligent and knowledgeable in all aspects of medicine. But Zeus killed Asclepius with a thunderbolt, because he raised the dead or he healed people and accepted gold for it. But Asclepius is still very significant in the world today, because certainly here in Europe, I'm not sure about in America, but the rod of Asclepius is still very symbolic of the medical profession. It's a staff that has two serpents wrapped around it, and you see that quite often in areas where traditional medicine is practiced. I'm sure you're familiar with that, and you will have seen it in many different places. Certainly on the ambulances throughout Central Europe, it's quite a prominent mark on the ambulances. So progressing from that, obviously there was the birth of Christ round about the early part of the first few years of AD, and healing began to become more popular and better known in different parts of the world. And that grew until the churches got involved and decided that they weren't happy with everybody practicing healing. Now, there's an interesting story that I'm going to tell you about here in the UK. Round about the 1500s, there was something known as the royal touch, and that was pretty much brought forward from Anglo-Saxon times, where the reigning monarch was thought to have healing powers. Elaborate ceremonies took place in those years, and after prayer, the king would touch the sufferer with his hand, and it was generally thought that his healing powers would be beneficial. I actually have a slightly different take on that. Some of you will be familiar with colloidal silver. Colloidal silver is a natural antibiotic. If it's administered in the correct proportions. If it has too many parts per million of silver in the solution, it's actually toxic to the body, and if it doesn't have enough, it's ineffective. So the balance has to be right. But what you have to remember is that the people at court, the people surrounding the king, would have eaten off silver platters, they'd have eaten off silverware, and that's where they would have taken in their silver. And I'm quite sure that that is why the royal family round about that time was in general better health, because they were taking in naturally the equivalent to colloidal silver. Now, over time, the monarchs got a little bit bored with touching people, and they introduced coins, and the coins were called angel coins, the last of which were coined in 1642, and that's around about the time of Charles I here in the UK. And it's strange how the transfer of power moved from the monarch to the coin. People actually believe that the coin possessed the healing property. And again, if it was silver, it probably did, because as they touched it, they would be taking silver particles from it. And that healing touch reached its peak with Charles II when he touched round about 5,000 people each year, which is quite remarkable. And then after that, it stopped. Now, coming up to the present days, there are always new ways of healing being discovered. Some of the more recent ones, or some of the ones in recent times, some of you may be aware of reconnective healing, which was introduced by Eric Pearl. Eric Pearl charges large sums of money for people to go and attend his courses and his workshops, and he passes on what he was given by his spirit communicators, his spirit team in the other world, gave him this this technique of healing, and he now sells that to many thousands of people all around the world. You may also have heard of Kathleen Milner. Kathleen Milner, another medium, and she was inspired to trademark Terra May Reiki and Seikin, being a natural healer herself. She went on to practice Reiki also, and she wasn't happy with the way her Reiki healing was progressing. So she went to consult her spirit friends in the spirit world, and they told her that there were some imbalances. For some of you that are aware of Usui Reiki, you know that Reiki is passed down from master to students, and in certain areas there's no they prevent you from keeping notes. So anybody that's like me probably can't remember what they did yesterday. So a few months down the road, who knows what they would have become, especially when you're working with different symbols and things of that nature. So she went to find those missing symbols, and she went to bring balance back to the Reiki program, which is exactly what she did. And she trademarked it as Terra May Reiki and Seikin. And she also asks the Terra May and Reiki students not to allow themselves to be attuned into any other form of Reiki, because it will introduce distortion. And it's usually about this time where people begin to ask me, so what's the difference between spiritual healing and Reiki healing? And the answer to that is very little. The healing energy that you channel is exactly the same. The differences are that when you practice spiritual healing, where we believe that we have somebody working with us from the spirit world who's guiding us and working with us to help deliver that healing energy. Do you need that person? Probably not. Because you can channel that energy all on your own. With Reiki, you do channel that energy all on your own, but you also have symbols. You have a little bag of symbols that you can use to enhance that power as and when you feel it necessary. So that's the real difference between spiritual healing and Reiki healing. It's more your mental approach to it than anything else. So spiritual healing is an innate gift. It's a natural energy therapy. It complements conventional medicine, treating mind, body, and spirit. Because as I mentioned before, when mind, body, and spirit are in harmony with each other, then the physical body follows through, and it itself is in harmony. So whenever you have a problem, whenever you have a condition present, it's because there's an imbalance between mind, body, and spirit. If you look at people who have suffered from, let's say, a cancerous situation, 9 times out of 10, if you go back anything up to 18 months to 2 years in that person's history, you'll most likely find a trigger point for that cancerous situation. Not in all cases, but I believe that the person would be able to identify that themselves. They may not be willing to share it with you, but I think anything up to 2 years, you will find an emotional trigger point for that condition that has arisen. And it can take anything up to 2 years for that to manifest in the physical. So when you're working with subtle energies, it can take equally as long to reverse that process. We live in the day of a quick fix where everybody wants to snap their fingers and have instant results. And unfortunately, it doesn't happen. With spiritual healing, you have to go the distance, you have to take the time, and you have to know that that is the right thing to do for your body. The other thing that you actually, while we're on the topic of cancerous conditions, one thing that I would like to share with you, I'm sure some of you know this already, but cancerous conditions can only survive in an acidic body. If you know somebody who's suffering with a cancerous condition, if you can encourage them to have an alkaline diet, then over time, over a short period of time, the body will switch from acidic to alkaline. The cancer condition cannot survive in an alkaline body. Now, having said that, that is not an easy thing to achieve. You have to do a little bit of research on alkaline foods, and surprisingly, some of the foods that you may think are alkaline and some that you think are acidic are not quite the way you would imagine them to be. So that's a good tip for anybody that you know, anybody that you encounter who is suffering with a cancer condition, and it's something for them to look into and to get to grips with sooner rather than later. The other thing that's quite useful, if you have a superficial cancerous condition, if you can raise the temperature in the surrounding area by 3 degrees, that will also help the cancerous condition to move away. Lots of people prefer to use infrared saunas for that these days. That they've become quite popular. But on the alternative front, those are 2 very useful points to arm yourself with when you're working with people who have those types of conditions. As we go through the course, I'll be sharing other little tips of that nature. Surprisingly, you would think that the medical profession would share that sort of information with their patients, but it doesn't always happen. So, as I said, spiritual healing complements conventional medicine by treating mind, body, and spirit. The healer acts as a conduit for the healing energy. So where does that healing energy come from? I'm sure some of you will have heard of Schumann resonance. Schumann resonance is, if you like, the Earth's heartbeat. It's actually 7.5 hertz. That's its precise frequency, and it's when a pulse bounces from the Earth up to the stratosphere and back down to the Earth. That pulse rate is 7.5 hertz. Not surprisingly, that is also the frequency of our base chakra. I believe it's that frequency that keeps us closely connected to the Earth. So I believe that when we tap into that healing energy, we're actually tapping into Schumann resonance, and we are channeling that frequency, because the energy emitted from a healer's hands has also been measured at 7.5 hertz. Now, to me, that's very important, because for many, many years, I went into healing with total blind faith, not really understanding it. And it was only when I discovered this connection between the base chakra, the healing energy, and Schumann resonance, that I was able to tie everything up together. And I think it's very important that you can have a scientific explanation as to what's actually happening when you're practicing healing. So I hope that made sense to everybody. I hope I explained that properly for you. If not, feel free to ask questions on that at the end. Now, as we administer that healing energy, it's often referred to as love and light, as I mentioned earlier, but it really is an actual energy that we're tapping into. It's important that you see yourself only as a channel for that energy. If you start to put your emotions into that healing, then it becomes magnetic healing, and you're giving of yourself rather than channeling. And it's important that you avoid that scenario, because you will become very tired, and you will be very little use to the people that you're working with over a short period of time. You are purely the channel. You are bringing in that energy and you're passing it along to the person that you're working with. And the benefits are felt on many, many levels, not just the physical, and its effects are quite profound. The energies relax the body, they release tension, they stimulate and promote self-healing, which is a very important aspect. And people quite often ask, is this the same as faith healing? Well, no, it isn't, because faith healing implies that you need to believe in a deity, and that the source of the healing is that deity. And of course it isn't. We're channeling universal energy. So where does it come from? As I said, it's all around us. It is the Earth's heartbeat, and we tap into that and we channel it to the person that we're working with. Depending on our beliefs, some healers see that energy as divine, and others see it as pure universal energy. And I don't think it really matters how you see that energy. I actually believe that it is divine, because if we believe that the source of creation is the divine, then everything must be from that divine source. But it matters not if you have a problem accepting that. It's pure universal energy. It's all around us. It's there to be channeled. It's non-invasive, and it involves no drugs or medicine, and no treatment is directly applied to the body. We're just, through entrainment, exposing the body to an energy force. And that energy force seeks to make the body whole, and it will go to the source of the problem. So you don't even need to know what the issue is, what the condition is of the person you're working with. You just need to know that automatically that energy will go to where it's needed the most. And it seeks to bring balance to the mind, body, and spirit. And it works through the power of unconditional love. So healing takes on many forms. You may find that some people just need to talk about their issues, their condition. And you may find that others just need to feel a healer's touch. Some people are never touched by other people for many days in their lives, and they just need that physical presence and that physical touch. It can mean more than anything else you do for them. Everybody's need is different, and what you will do as a healer is you'll become a very good listener. You'll develop incredible listening skills, and you'll learn to read into what you're being told by the person that you're working with. And it's also good to recognize that you may encounter situations that may require a different skill set to the one that you're able to offer. So never be afraid to recommend somebody that you're working with to a different practitioner if you think that they have a skill set that's a better fit to helping the individual. And if you do that, you'll very quickly build a circle of therapists of different healing modalities, where you're able to refer people to each other. It's quite useful to be able to do that. We also need to remember that when we're working with healing, it is complementary to orthodox medicine, and we should always work in cooperation with the medical profession. In most parts of the world, the medical profession retain overall responsibility for that individual, and we work with their permission. And very similarly with animals, certainly here in the UK, and I know throughout many parts of Europe, if you're working with animals, then the veterinary professional retains responsibility for the animal, but we are allowed to work in conjunction with them. It's very important when you're working as a healer to maintain the dignity and professionalism of the calling, and making sure that you behave professionally on all levels. It's quite possible as you go through a healing session with somebody, different situations or different elements will come to light. And although a person may present physical symptoms, you may discover that the underlying cause may be unresolved conflict, guilt, stress, negative thinking, any level of emotional situations that, if left unaddressed, can cause issues that will surface as conditions. And you may find that if these are not being dealt with satisfactorily, then the healing may only be temporary. So if you find that you're helping somebody for a number of weeks and then they come back and there's a setback for a few weeks, then do a little further digging and see if you can find if there are other aspects that need to be addressed, usually of an emotional nature, that you may or may not be able to help with. But if you can encourage that person to work with them, then you'll ease the situation and you will allow healing to progress in a more positive way. And remember that the aim is always to restore balance and harmony to mind, body, and spirit. As healers, in many areas of the world, we are not allowed to claim that we can heal. We offer healing, we offer to help, but we're not allowed, certainly here in the UK, we are not allowed to make any claims that we can heal. That right is reserved by the medical profession, surprisingly enough. They are the only ones who are allowed to say they heal. So as healers, we work alongside them and do what we can. So what makes a good healer? In my view, there's one key aspect to a good healer, and that is intention. And as we go through the course, you'll hear me speaking about intention time and time and time again, because I really do believe that that is the key to becoming a good healer. If you like, your intention is you yourself are the channel for that healing energy. Your intention is, if you like, the valve or the faucet. The greater degree, the greater the intent, then the greater the flow of healing energy or power. So it's very, very important that you first and foremost focus on intention. So what is intention? Well, intention can be thought of as having and acting with purpose. And for us, that purpose is to heal. Prayer can also be a form of intention. It's making a decision deep inside to heal and hold that for a period of time. Early experiments with plants, both given water, one unaffected and the other exposed to healing intentions given by a healer. The one exposed to the one given the water exposed to healing they showed much stronger growth and much faster growth than those that didn't. And I'm sure a lot of you are aware of Dr. Emoto, and you've probably seen the video. If you haven't, you can search on YouTube Dr. Emoto, and you can see what happened to water molecules when they were subjected to different thoughts, to love, to hatred, to many, many different aspects. It's fascinating, and it shows you how real and how powerful our thoughts and intention can be. So if you haven't seen that video, please take a look. You will really enjoy it. It's a fascinating video clip, and it's only a matter of 2 or 3 minutes long, but you really will enjoy it. Experiments have also been conducted with mice. Wounds in mice healed much faster when treated by healers. Now, the good thing about working with animals is that there's no placebo effect with animals, which is a very interesting aspect. We've always had a number of German Shepherd dogs here, and we had one that was particularly sick for a number of years, and whenever he was in pain, he would come and push my arm off the sofa, and he'd walk underneath to where he needed the healing. He'd stay there for a few minutes, and then he'd move away. Now, he knew on some level that that was helping him, and he did it so frequently because he was in such a state that I spent most of my time giving him healing. But he was a lovely dog, and to me that was such recognition for what we're able to do for our pets. And of course, we do it for our pets, we can do it for our friends and family as well. There's a cardiologist in San Francisco who shows that the healing prayers affected the recovery of cardiac surgery patients and had far fewer complications. What he did was he brought the family together before surgery. They had a little prayer meeting, and the family will sit and they will continue to pray throughout the surgery, send their healing thoughts, create that intent, and the surgery went with far fewer complications than they would expect, and the recovery time was far quicker than they would have anticipated. So intention, thoughts really do have power and influence, and we should always remember that. In just the same way that we should also remember when we have bad thoughts, they also carry out into the universe, and they'll resonate there for a very long time too. So before you send out those negative thoughts, just think twice. Remember, they have a power, and 9 times out of 10 they have a habit of boomeranging back and returning to you. So do remember that. Intention reduces randomness. Intentions and physical reality are unquestionably linked. If you look, again, let's look at a cancerous condition. The cells are in a state of randomness. So healing and our intentions help to reduce that randomness, bring back order, so that the cells become back, they get back under control of the body. And intent is a non-local phenomena. It doesn't happen according to the laws of physics. So what else makes a good healer? Becoming ego-less. Letting go of your ego. Ego, the Latin word for I. And when we're healing or doing any spiritual work, there's no room for ego. We have to learn to become ego-less. We have to learn to become selfless. And if you remember, I said that healing is a passive energy. It's a passive state that we're approaching. down the lower end of the spectrum. And as we move into that passive state, it's quite possible that over a period of time practicing healing, we will begin to encounter an altered state. Now, altered states and healing in many parts of the world are very rarely mentioned, and that's because insurance companies do not like the thought of anybody claiming that they're in an altered state. Like it or not, insurance companies, the very fact that you're creating that intent and you're putting yourself in that mindset, you are in an altered state. They will never accept that, and very few insurance companies will ever accept that, but it's the reality of the situation that we're working with. And over a period of time, as that power increases, as you become more selfless, then it is quite possible that you can begin to encounter a trance-like state. Your workers in the spirit world can draw closer, they can take greater control, and eventually that can progress to trance healing or psychic surgery. As I said, my father was a trance healer, and that was really all I knew up until probably being about 15 or 16 years of age. I will tell you a very funny story of the first time I experienced my father actually receiving healing. He was being given trance healing by the leader of his circle, the medium of his circle, who had a Zulu working with her, who entranced her, and he would cup his hands and he would blow into my father's back, or the joint that they were working on. And I was 7 years old. I was in hysterics. I thought it very funny. And he stopped and said, I will speak to you later, which he did. But in the meantime, I just enjoyed it because I thought it was very funny. I had no idea what was happening. It was only years later that I began to appreciate what was happening. But I do know that whenever my father received healing, he was always much better a few days afterwards. So yes, getting back to ego, we have to become selfless, or we have to become more selfless, and don't be at all concerned if that does encourage an altered state. Go with it. I never discourage altered states because you have the trust in the people that are working with you, and it can only lead to good places. In case I don't think I did mention, but the reason why insurance companies are not happy with altered states is because should people be touched inappropriately by somebody, then it's possible that person can claim that they were not responsible for their actions, and that's the primary reason why insurance companies are not happy with healers working in an altered state. It's also important when you're working with healing that you don't give clairvoyant messages. Remember what I said, clairvoyant messages are the other end of the spectrum. They're that heightened state of awareness. When you're healing, you're down the passive end of the spectrum, so you shouldn't be looking for any messages. That doesn't mean to say that you may not be given certain pieces of information either right at the start or right at the end, but you certainly shouldn't be receiving any form of clairvoyance in the middle of a session. Okay, now I want to play you a video clip now.
Intention, belief. Can these factors influence healing? If you think you have an incurable disease, if you think it yourself, you are right. If you think your problem is curable, then you are also right.
Okay, I'm just going to pause there for a second. Can you just let me know whether you can see and hear that? You can. Good. Okay, we'll continue with it.
It all depends on your intention.
When you think about intention, what is intention? And how does intention play a role in healing? Intention plays a role when you think about how our thoughts and our emotions and our cognitions influence our immune system and our endocrine system. And we know that this happens. We know that people who feel a tremendous amount of stress, for example, have a diminished capacity in terms of their immune systems functioning.
It's been discovered in the laboratory over the last 15 or 20 years, for example, that intention does have physical effects.
So, for example, we recently conducted a study where we recruited couples, one of whom had cancer. And we took the partner of the cancer patient and we trained them in what we call the compassionate intention program. And so they were invited in to participate in a training program. A lot of it had to do with meditation, it had to do with heart opening, it had to do with subtle energies. And we took them through this training program, and then we asked them to go home and continue to practice this intervention for 8 weeks. We brought them back and we put them in our laboratory, and we monitored the patient in one room. And we put them in a 2,000-pound electromagnetically shielded room so that there was no possibility of electromagnetic fields or the partner of the cancer patient talking to them on their radio, on their cell phone and saying, okay, breathe deeply now. We could rule out any of those kind of conventional explanations. Meanwhile, the partner who'd gone through the training program sat in another room and watched the image of their loved one on a closed circuit television screen. And then at random times throughout the session, they were asked to send loving, compassionate intention to the patient. The idea was to see if we could find correlations between the intention of the one person and the physiological activity of the other. What we found is that there was a significant correlation in the physiological activity of this person and the physiological activity of the other. This suggests that there is some way in which information is transferred that isn't accountable by the conventional Newtonian model of cause and effect. You know, the partner of the cancer patient wasn't coming in and whispering in their partner's ear, calm down now. You know, quite the contrary. They were at a distance and there was no way that the two people knew when this kind of interaction was happening, and yet it happened.
Sending an intention that I am better, sending information with belief that I am better, is sending information to the body to correct itself. Because as we say, a thought is an actual physical energy too. And it sends information to the body as well.
It's been very well demonstrated that our belief system affects how we behave and how we perform. And it also affects our lifestyle. So if we don't believe that we can help ourselves, we probably cannot. If we don't believe that positive information is useful to our health and well-being, then it probably won't be.
Our thoughts create our body moment by moment. When we think positive thoughts, we release certain chemicals into our body. When we think negative thoughts, we release negative chemicals into our body. And those have a profound effect on how the cells are behaving and how the nutrition is being used. It's very obvious to me, working as an osteopath, that the stress that people hold in their body has various patterns according to how they're thinking. Probably the most essential aspect of healing is to believe in the modality you're using and to stay positive in some way. There's so much evidence about belief in a system of medicine being crucial to the effectiveness of that. I used to say to people who have cancer, after researching the limitations of things like chemotherapy, don't have chemotherapy, it only works 9% of the time. I don't do that anymore. And the reason I don't is that I believe that belief itself is the body's strongest medicine. And if you believe something is going to work, regardless of what that is, it's going to work for you. There was a study in Houston
of some patients going through a knee operation for arthritis. Half actually went through an operation where they were worked on for their arthritis. The other half were given a sham operation where they just opened the knee and then closed it and did nothing. They found over 3 years of follow-up that both sets of patients reported having no pain. So the patients where nothing was done to them still reported being pain-free. Their arthritis was gone. There have been other studies looking at if there's any difference between going to the gym and thinking about going to the gym. And with this study, they took a group of people and they sent half to the gym to work on their biceps. And the other half were allowed to sit in their armchairs and just think about going to the gym and working on their biceps. And they still recorded a very strong effect in the group who had just sat in their armchairs. The couch potatoes still built up their biceps. So the body really can't distinguish between, action and thought. And you see this most clearly with the placebo effect.
The important thing to note from that, oh, by the way, that clip was taken from The Living Matrix. It's a few years old now, but it's a fascinating video if you want to see more along those lines. There's some really interesting detail in that video. It really is fascinating. So yeah, intention. Thought precedes action, and if you as Lynn Taggart explained, then the body really can't tell the difference. So if you can find a healing modality that the person that you're working with truly believes in, then you're halfway there. And I think that is why lots of alternative therapies produce such inconsistent results, because some people believe that one particular type of alternative therapy will work for them, whereas it's dismissed by another. So finding out what it is that the person you're working with believes is going to help them is really key. And the other thing to note while we're on that particular topic is when somebody comes to you for healing, basically they gather up all their problems and they come and they hand them over to you and they say, here you are, Nick, here's my issues, sort them out for me. And it's your job as a healer to pick all those issues back up and hand them back to that individual and say, thank you very much, but I'm going to show you how to deal with these problems, how to work through these issues. And in my mind, that is the healer's job. If you can achieve that, the person will be on the road to recovery. It's not as easy as I just explained. It takes a little while, and you develop many different techniques along the way, but that in essence, that is what you need to do. Pick all those problems back up, hand them over to the individual and say, look, we're going to work through these together and we're going to find the right solution for you. So moving on to getting well. Well, the first thing you have to accept is that for some people, they just do not want to get well. That can be on a conscious level, it can be on a subconscious level. For some people, their condition is the only thing that gives them a little bit of attention. And there's no way that they're going to give that up. And that's really because there's a feeling of there's no feeling of self-worth. So again, that's an aspect that you need to work on with that individual. There are many other reasons why people don't want to get well that we'll cover in great detail. But it's important to recognize that at a very early stage, because your approach will be very different to somebody who really is fighting to get better and move forward with their situation. It's also important when you're working with somebody that you set expectations correctly. You explain to them what you're going to do. You can explain to them what they can expect. And we'll also cover things as we go through the course about what can happen if you have a healing crisis. People quite often get confused about a healing crisis. And it's important that they know to recognize exactly what's going on and how to deal with it. It's also important when you're working with somebody that you maintain that energy connection with them. So when you're administering healing, some people like to touch and some people like to work in the auric field. To me, it doesn't matter which way you work. Both are equally as good. But if you do work in the auric field, then you must always be within a couple of inches of the body so that you maintain that energy connection. And throughout the whole of the session, you should maintain that connection. Because if your hands are dipping in and out of the auric field, then you're actually bouncing into the auric field of that individual on an ongoing basis, and it will create an energy disturbance. So once you've made the connection, stay with it until the end of the session. I always like to start off by putting my hands on the shoulder of the person that I'm working with. And as I do that, I do two things. I firstly make sure that I'm mentally in the right frame of mind. I clear away all my day-to-day issues. I make sure I'm focused on the job in hand. I clear my mind and create the intent for what I want to do for that individual. And obviously the intent is to work with them the best I possibly can, to help them progress as best I possibly can. So it's an important time, as well as allowing the energies to blend between the two of you so that the imbalances are gone prior to the healing session commencing. It also gives you a few minutes to get into the right zone mentally, to move into that sacred space in your mind and to stay there throughout the healing session. And obviously, in order to do that, you need to make sure that you've left all your problems outside the room. Timing's also important with a healing session. Lots of people believe that it's good to allow an hour for a healing session, and I have to totally disagree with that. What I like to do for an initial appointment with somebody, I will allow 45 minutes. That allows me 15 minutes at the beginning of the session to chat with them, to understand a little more about their condition. It then allows me to have a 20-minute hands-on healing session, because I firmly believe that you cannot sustain a channeled healing session for any longer than 15 to 20 minutes. At the end of that 15 to 20 minutes, unless you're very, very experienced, your mind will begin to drift and wander. You'll be thinking, okay, what am I doing next? What am I going to have for dinner tonight? What's on television tonight? 15 to 20 minutes, unless you're very experienced, is the time period that you should aim for. As you become more experienced, you can extend that if you feel it's necessary. But I would think that 15 to 20 minutes is perfectly adequate, and then that leaves you 10 minutes at the end for that person to recover. Remember, as well as you being in a slightly altered state while you're administering the healing, they are also in a slightly altered state as they're receiving it. They're beginning to relax. They're getting into their own little altered state, and they need time to recover. You need to make sure that they're fully grounded when they return. It's also possible that when you're giving a healing treatment, that you may want to start to scan the auric field of an individual, and that is just passing your hand through the auric field, so that over time you'll develop a sensitivity to the energy in the area of the person that you're working with. You will be able to detect blockages, you'll be able to detect energy leakages, and you'll know when you sense that energy change that that's an area that needs to be worked on. You may sense those energy changes as heat, as cold, as tingling, many different sensations, and every person may sense that change in a different way. I may feel heat, you may feel tingling, but it matters not, because what we're interested in is the fact that it's an energy change. And if there's an energy change, then that's an area that's slightly out of balance and an area that's in need of healing. Now, I just want to expand upon the biofield, the energy field of the body, and I'm going to share a slide with you. Okay, hopefully you can all see that. And the human energy field, or the biofield, is governed by the 7 major chakras. And each of the 7 major chakras governs one of the endocrine glands. So as you can see from the slide there, the crown chakra controls the pituitary gland, the master gland, the brow, the pineal gland, the throat chakra, the thyroids, the heart, the thymus, the solar plexus, the adrenals, the splenic chakra, the sacral chakra, the pancreas, and the base chakra, the gonads. Now, as you know, the endocrine system emit chemical messengers into the body. They're the signals that go out to the various parts of the body. The pituitary gland is the master gland, and each of the chakras controls the area closely to where it's located. Now, that's particularly important because as you scan the body and you find imbalances, you will know that it could be connected. Well, obviously it will be connected to that area of the body, but you may be able to go a little further and see if it's connected to one of the endocrine glands or something of that nature. Now I'm just going to change the slide. Okay, and I want to show you a few images here. If you look at the lady on the upper left, if you look at her brow, you can see that she has a very large red blob in the middle of her brow, and that's indicative of a congested brow chakra. If you look at the little child opposite, you'll see that the brow chakra is much brighter and much more open. And as you pass through the auric field, you will sense these changes as heat, tingling, different sensations. If you look at the gentleman on the bottom left, if you look in the area of his bladder, you'll see that there's a rather large blip in his auric field. And that's because this gentleman has a bladder tumor. So in the area of his bladder, that bladder tumor is causing a disruption in the energy field. And if you were to pass your hands through that area, you would sense that change. And if you look at the gentleman on the bottom right, if you look at his chest, you can see there's a rather large, round energy blockage on his chest. This gentleman recently suffered a heart condition. He has an energy blockage around his heart. You can also see from his chin that he has an energy leakage, And also from the sacral chakra, you can see an energy leakage down there too. Now, these are the things that you will sense with your hands. The system that I'm using here, I've been using for a number of years, and it comes up with some fascinating images. And I will be talking much more about that as we go through the healing program. But I just wanted to show you some images so that you can relate to what you're sensing with people and the actual images that you'll see. Okay, just bear with me a second while I go back. Okay, now just before we finish today, I just wanted to touch on distant healing, because distant healing is just as important and as significant as hands-on healing. Distant healing is sometimes referred to as absent healing. We're channeling the same energy, or we are sending the same energy to that individual. Do you need to ask that person if it's okay for you to send it? No, you don't, because that's done at a soul level. And if the soul chooses not to accept that, then they will, then that energy will be used to the better good of that individual. And it's good when you practice distant healing that you set aside the same time each day. You can practice healing as a group, or you can do it individually. If your mind's anything like mine, I'm absolute rubbish with remembering people's names. So I have a book. I have a list of people's names in a book who are in need of healing, and I place the book between my hands and I channel healing to all the names on that list. And because I've created the correct intent, I know that the healing energy goes to those individuals. And just to finish today, again, I want to show you a video clip.
I had an irregularity on a kidney that was discovered by an MRI. The physicians wanted to biopsy that, and I said, no, we're not going to do that. And I had a healer, Adam, a young man in Vancouver, who was developing his talents as a healer. He wanted to work on it. Over a period of a month, we did that once a week.
Using just a photograph, Adam can perceive a person's body field in the form of a holographic image. He sees areas where the energy flow is blocked, which indicates illness or injury. Through his intention to heal, he manipulates energy and information to clear these blockages, allowing the body to change.
I went back and had a sonogram made of that a month after diagnosis. The radiologist examined the data and said, whatever you're doing, keep doing it, that the irregularity in the kidney is smaller and disappearing. Went back 3 months after that, and later in 2003, after that, where the total healing period had been less than 6 months, and again had sonogram, and it was totally gone. Everything was regular again. Nearly all of the healings that I have worked with have been remote or at a distance, and it doesn't seem to make the distance seems to have no effect at all, which would again suggest we're dealing with a quantum phenomenon. The healer was in Vancouver, British Columbia. I was in Florida, the longest distance across the United States. So I continued then to experiment with different healing modes for different things with different people. But the mechanism is always the same. There's information being transferred, and there seems to be an energy transfer as well that's palpable.
Okay, well, that's where I'm going to stop for today. I hope you found that quite I hope you find aspects of that of interest, and obviously there's much more to come in the sessions that we have scheduled. But at this point in time, I'd like very much to open up to questions if you have any.
And Nick, also, after you answer questions, if you could give a brief overview of the 4-module certificate healing program for people who are interested in attending, that would be great too.
Okay, I will find my notes. Okay, so let me just scan through the chat and see if we have questions.
Yeah, and I know one person asked a question on your live the other day that we had already signed off on. In terms of doing any practical work, I know that in the course you're going to be giving homework in between sessions, and people were asking, does that include actual practical hands-on or aura-on spiritual healing practice that they can do?
I'm going to be sharing with you different techniques as we go through the course, and of course, the healing, as well as being very much to do with intent, it's also to do with practice. The more you practice, the better healer you'll become. So you should be practicing at every possible opportunity, be that on friends, family, pets. It doesn't matter. If you have pets, you'll find that they'll lap it up. They won't be able to get enough. They love that healing vibration, and it's important that you practice, because the more you practice, the greater healer you'll become. So I can see from here that Jane, you had a question about Schumann resonance, and I did explain that, I think, in some detail. What I will do is I will find an explanation for that. I know a very good site that gives the perfect explanation of Schumann resonance, and I will share it with you if I can work out how to do that. Bear with me, okay. Yeah, we answered the one about connecting with your spirit worker.
Where do I ask my question?
Sorry?
Where can I ask my question other than verbally right now?
Well, you can ask it verbally.
Okay, I love it. So I'm just wondering if we can basically consider your spiritual healing training, would that be like quantum healing? Because we're kind of working, you know, to work with the body, mind, spirit.
You're working. Yes, you're working to heal the mind, body, spirit. To bring, not to heal. You're working to bring balance to mind, body, spirit. Once there's balance there, then everything falls in line. You only have a condition present because one of those aspects is out of balance. Once you restore the harmony, then over a period of time, balance is restored and the condition disappears.
Would you call that quantum healing as well?
Yeah. Quantum healing is a
Tricky term.
Yeah, it is, and it means different things to different people. It's down. I think it's down to your interpretation. Its focus is to bring balance. Bring balance to mind, body, spirit.
Thank you.
Okay, we answered that question.
I think if you have a question, it just would be easier. Just turn on your mic and ask Nick.
Can I?
I probably will be, yeah.
Okay, this is
No?
Jane. I'll go. I had asked Nick if, will you be giving us a meditation or a process to kind of help us merge with the healing energy?
What just happened with the screen?
I don't know. Something.
Can you still hear me, Nick?
I can hear you. Yes, I can't see you. It seems to have gone a little strange.
Okay.
Well, somebody shared their screen, and the person is whoever's guest. So that person needs to stop sharing their screen. There we go.
Okay.
There we go. That's better.
Hey, thank you.
Okay, you want me to repeat my question, Nick?
Yes, please.
Okay, I was wondering if you would be giving us a process or a meditation to help us merge with the healing energy.
Yes. We're going to look in depth at different aspects of meditation and ways to attune yourself to the healing energy. We actually cover that in 2 different parts. I believe it's in the first module and again in the second module from a slightly different perspective.
Okay, and will there be a way for us to like practice with you, like you helping us do that?
The meditation.
Well, just going into that healing, merging with the space that healing.
I'm happy to do that. If you would like me to do that, then I'm happy to do that. Perhaps at the end of one of the sessions, because I know lots of people will be already familiar with that process. So maybe at the end of the first or second session, we could have a 10-minute session where we just focus on that, where I talk you through that process.
Okay.
I'm quite happy to do that.
Okay. And then I just had one last question, and somebody else. My question is, and why my interest is that I have a group of healers that I met in my near-death experience, and so I'm wanting to learn how to work with them. Will we be? Will that be a part of this?
You mean in the spirit world?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think if there's go ahead.
So carry on. Sorry.
No, I mean, if there's already beings in the spirit world who seem to be connected with this healing, will we be able to learn how to work with them?
Okay, I believe, and this is just my personal view, I believe that before we incarnate, we have an agreement to work with certain people. And those people are there most of our life, waiting for the opportunity to do whatever it is we've agreed to do with them. And I believe that's in all forms of mediumship and for all forms of life, even for those that are not mediumistic, they still have agreement that people will walk by their side. And when you work mediumistically, be that healing or clairvoyantly or any of the clairs, you're blending, you're building that bridge, and the more you do it, the closer they become, the more real they become. So it really is more practice that you need.
Okay, thanks.
The more you practice, the closer they come.
I have a question. This is Anna. I do a lot of distance healing, and this was channeled essentially during readings for clients over the last couple of years, and it's become a pretty big part of my practice, and I am looking for some guidance and some information and structure to give this a home. And so I'm just wondering if we'll cover more of that. Distance healing, I feel like it's, as you talk about the healing with the body, more specifically connected with the auric field or the physical body, it feels the same to me as what I'm doing with clients who are far away or even sitting in the same room as me.
Absolutely.
But I just wanted to make sure that I'm on the same page with you and where we're headed in this course.
Absolutely. As I said right at the start, before we went into distant healing in detail, there's no difference. The healing is the same.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking forward to the course.
Good, good.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I have a very, very long career. I started doing massage therapy when I was about 15, I learned. And then I've done advanced body work, including orthobiotomy, which has an energetic component. I studied a little in my 20s, esoteric healing. I am developing mediumship, and I'm wondering how that, that history, how it may help and how it may hinder proceeding learning energy healing this way.
Okay. I don't believe it's going to hinder anything. In fact, it should enhance. The fact that you're practicing different healing modalities means that you're probably already subconsciously healing people in exactly the same way as you will be when you're directly focusing on spiritual healing. But if you find it helpful, then, as you say, you practice massage, you practice other healing modalities, and
Body work.
you just focus on that particular modality that you're working on at the time. As I've already said, with the massage, the healing with your existing healing modalities, the healing is naturally coming into that. You may not be focusing on it on its own, but it will be there, and it will be playing its part. And it's fine if you want to combine them, or if you want to keep it separate, then that's fine too.
Okay. One other very quick question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe it's possible that spirit can and will just give us direct guidance on how to do healing? Because I got sort of an instruction at some point for doing distance healing, and I just do it because it was shown to me. And so whenever I pray for someone or wish them well, I do sort of what I was shown. I mean, is that part of your process, that spirit is always teaching you new things?
I believe with all forms of mediumship, there comes a time when the spirit world calls on you to do whatever it is that you've agreed to do. And how I like to say the spirit world are ringing the bell. How you hear that bell or how you interpret that bell is different for each individual. But when the time's right, that bell is rung, and that's when you come into whatever it is that you need to be involved with regard to mediumship.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Gail. I have a few more questions, if you don't mind. I appreciate your help and knowledge, Nick, and I love the videos. They were excellent.
Thank you.
I'll just ask them in no particular order. Do you think we'll learn self-healing and how to help others do self-healing? I know that's not exactly the nature of this course, but I'm just feeling intuitively like that's the way the world is going to go at some point, is to learn how to heal themselves. Will we touch on that at all?
Absolutely. That's actually one of the very first things that I will be asking you to do, is to work on yourselves. As healers, you're natural givers. As a natural giver, you tend to neglect yourself. If you neglect yourself, then you're not going to be in a very fit state to help anybody else. So healing yourself is very important, and it is one of the first things that we'll be focusing on.
Perfect.
And I give you different techniques to enhance that as well.
Wonderful. You also mentioned that we have the mental, emotional, and physical and spiritual bodies, and to stay basically just a couple inches above the physical body when we're in the aura. But I had also heard some time ago that the emotional and mental and maybe spiritual bodies are varying heights above the body. So I'm wondering, do we need to go maybe 6 inches and maybe 10 or 12 inches above the body to heal these other bodies?
No, because they're, as you go through the different bodies, they become more refined, they become more subtle. When you're close to the body, you're at the grassroots, and whatever you're channeling at that level permeates through the other vibrations.
Perfect.
What happens when you're in normal day-to-day mode, the auric field is round about 2 inches away from the body. As you go into a healing mode or a meditative state of mind, the auric field expands, and the auric field can expand anything up to 1 meter away from the body. When the auric field has expanded to 1 meter away from your body, you are extremely sensitive. So you need to be able to close that down before you go out to day-to-day life. Otherwise, you're just in a far too sensitive state to encounter day-to-day issues.
And you'll help us to do that?
I will explain it to you, and I'll give you techniques to deal with it, yes.
And you also mentioned that when we're receiving messages from loved ones or guidance intuitively while we're doing a healing, we're in too much of a heightened state and not passive enough. And I understand that, but it seems to me to still happen anyway. So I feel like, am I not doing it right or well enough? Should I be more passive than I am?
You definitely need to be down the passive end of the spectrum, and that's more, and you can encourage that by different meditative techniques in order to slow your mind to take it down that end of the spectrum. Most definitely, that is when you'll be more productive as a healer, when your mind's in that passive, relaxed state.
And do you think a healer is also benefiting personally from letting the spirit flow through them as well?
Can you expand a little on
Well,
that?
when you're doing healing and the energy is coming through you to benefit the client, is it also benefiting you?
Oh, absolutely. Whenever you're giving healing, or whenever you're in an environment where you're working with the spirit, you're always receiving healing energy from them. That's part of the blending process. As they blend and they draw close, and they're surrounding you with that healing energy.
Thank you. My last quick question is, do animals have a mental and emotional and spiritual body as well? Because for them to be sick, does that mean they had first an emotional flaw or thought or something that went on? Or did they just absorb mine as their caretaker?
They do, but not to the same degree that we do. And they're susceptible to different influences that we're not.
Thank you very much.
Nic, just wanted to thank you very quickly. I very much enjoyed this, and I look forward to taking your course. I'm logging off now, so just wanted to thank you.
Okay, just before you go, for those of you that haven't seen, I have shared the Earth Breathing website where you can read a little bit more about Schumann resonance. If you go into the chat, you'll see it up there. For those of you that are having difficulty, it's earthbreathing.co.uk, And if you select the Schumann resonance link, you can read a little bit more about
Beautiful.
Schumann resonance.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for.
Thank you.
You have a question, Terry?
I do. That's okay. Real quick.
Okay, very last question from Terry Cohn, please.
Okay. Hi, Nick. You mentioned
Hi.
that healing is all about intention and universal energy. So what is the difference between traditional Reiki and holy fire Reiki and this type of spiritual healing that you teach?
Okay, I'm not familiar with that particular strand of Reiki that you mentioned, but Reiki and spiritual healing, in essence, they channel the same energy. You're tapping into and you are channeling the same energy. With Reiki, you don't have the spirit person shadowing you. You have your symbols, your tools, and you enhance your healing power with the symbols. With spiritual healing, you have that person that works and blends with you.
Okay, because I was just brought that up because they market Holy Fire Reiki as like an amped up version of traditional Reiki. So I never quite understood what that meant. So
if there's a few dollars attached to it, it doesn't surprise me. But healing energy is healing energy.
okay, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. And big thank you to Nick for sharing his time, wisdom, knowledge with all of us. It was very enlightening. I feel that most of us were really surprised. We weren't sure what we were going to be learning today, and we certainly learned a lot. So thank you again, Nick. And the course begins March 1st. If you're interested in attending, it's at spirithealing.eventbrite.com, and hope to see you soon.
Excellent. Thank you ever so much for listening. I really appreciate your time and look forward to chatting to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.